You wanted real talk, and this is where you'll hear it. Uninhibited by the toxic influences of cancel culture, unvarnished and unfettered, unencumbered by the censorship of traditional radio, uncontaminated by big media interests.
And now, Shurman Unlimited.
Well, happy Canada Day, everybody. This is Peter Shurman, and this is another edition of Shurman Unlimited, which is going to become much more regular in the days and weeks to come. We'll call this the Canada Day edition because July the 1st, of course, we celebrate the 155th anniversary of the foundation of our country, of Confederation, and that's a very special time. Interestingly, somebody sent something along about that very recently, and it had to do, it actually came from Ontario Proud. And Ontario Proud is admittedly a somewhat right-of-center organization, but they've got this one right. We're not going to get into politics over it. What they say is the activists trying to cancel Canada Day. Can you believe it? The city of Winnipeg has renamed their events on July 1st to New Day, whatever that means. Apparently, New Day is intended as a vision of a woke future because they're stripping away anything fun, no fireworks, and they're telling people they should use the day for reflection and healing and basically feeling guilty instead. And it's not the first time, actually. You might remember 2020. There was a Halifax newspaper that was featured across the country for the wrong reasons. They printed a Canadian flag on page E9, so in the first section on the 9th page, but they felt the need to put a trigger warning on the front page just in case anybody was offended by the Canadian flag. You know what? This makes me sick, and it's bullshit, frankly. We have a country, and it's one of those things where I feel strongly enough, and I think most of you probably feel strongly enough, to say, you know what, if you don't like it, there are a couple of hundred other countries in the world. Get the hell out of here. We don't need you that badly. And we certainly don't need wokeism. I mean, if you listen to the introduction to this program with that great big voice, the scripting goes no more counterculture, no more great big media dictating what you may or may not say. This is just about me. And it's about you because we interact here. So you listen because you want to hear my opinion. Maybe you hate it, and that's why you listen. Or maybe you love it, and that's why you listen. Either way, I'll take it because the idea is to stir up opinion. And if we're so woke in Canada that we have to forget we're Canada, we've got way bigger problems to solve with whether or not you want to call this New Day or Canada Day or Dominion Day or whatever the hell. The bottom line here is we've got a country, frankly, a country that you've heard me say before needs fixing, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And that fixing had better start being done. It's not being done by the present occupant of the Prime Minister's office, so we're going to need to make some changes. And if we don't make some changes, and you've heard me say this before too, we're not going to make it past 2030, at least not in the form that we're in now. So you people who want to call this something other than Canada Day, and you people who want to spit on the country because you don't like the way things are going, the hell with you. Not interested in what you have to say. Tomorrow's your day to just go do whatever it is you do while the rest of us celebrate. And if you want to go wherever it is you go to see fireworks, by all means do it, or set some off yourself in a safe and appropriate place, and teach these precepts to your children, because it's this country that gave birth to us and gave us the opportunities that we have. And yeah, we may be suffering along with the rest of the world right now as we come out of a pandemic and we fight a problem economically. But you know what? These things have come and gone before, and we're going to do that. We're going to succeed. All right, enough of that. I also wanted to get into the subject of Jagmeet Singh and the Liberals. I said I was going to talk a little bit about Canada and how it works. Jagmeet Singh and the Liberals, the government spends a lot of money subsidizing oil companies, is what he says. They make record profits, is what he says. Both true. But Singh is complaining, and he wants to double the GST tax credit and increase the Canadian child benefit to help people retain more money in their pockets and make up for what they're spending at the gas pumps, not to say food stores and the like. The problem for Jagmeet Singh who's the head of the NDP and the supporter of the Trudeau minority government, is Trudeau isn't listening to him. Not that I necessarily agree with Singh on the things that he wants to do, but this is a guy who's supposed to be in lockstep with Trudeau, and yet he whines about what Trudeau does or doesn't do. So here's what I have to say, Jagmeet Singh. You're a big noise, is what you are. You threaten to do things, but you don't do anything. Singh says he's not going to trigger an election. Get off your high horse, Jagmeet. You're not the guy who triggers the election. Breaking the agreement you've got with the Liberals doesn't trigger an election. All parties participate in confidence votes if and when they're held. And if a confidence vote is lost, that triggers an election. And it's not you, Jagmeet Singh. You don't run Canada. Not that Trudeau does that very well either, but if you're not happy with the arrangement you've got with Trudeau, give us all a chance and stop whining, because he's not going to adopt the things that you say. He doesn't care that you exist. You have done for him, by agreeing with him in the first place to support his government, all he ever wanted from you. And under these circumstances, all we can do is what we're doing, which is floundering. And I said before, we won't get to 2030 in the form that we're in now, sitting here at age 155. There is nothing written in stone anywhere that says Canada has to exist. Do I want it to exist? I imagine that what I said about Canada today says that I do. And I'm sure that the majority of people who are listening to me now think that it should. There are a few who don't. I think that Jagmeet Singh, you want it to exist. I think that Justin Trudeau wants it to exist. But Trudeau is nothing but a virtue signaling expert and a pompous man standing on a world stage that is afforded to him by being the head of Canada, and demonstrating his largesse when Canadians need the money, which is our money. And I'll read you something. It says here, while participating at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, Prime Minister Trudeau today announced $250 million to help address the global food security crisis. This funding will address the increasing global food and nutrition needs, especially for the most vulnerable, and with a focus in sub-Saharan Africa. Today's announcement builds on previous commitments to address global food and nutrition needs. In 2022, Canada has already allocated $514.2 million for urgent humanitarian food and nutrition assistance, and since 2020, Canada has allocated over $3 billion for gender-responsive humanitarian assistance around the world. Well, you know, I love when we help other people. I love when I get, on a personal level, the opportunity to help other people. But I do know, and you've heard me say recently, that charity begins at home. I have a couple of facts for you. And these come from Second Harvest, the food bank people. Canada now has 4 times more food charities than grocery stores. In 2021, 6.7 million Canadians, around 18%, relied on food charities. 1 in 7 Canadians were food insecure themselves due to COVID-19. 72% more Canadians used food charities during COVID-19. Post-pandemic, so now, national food shortfall decreased, so we're actually better off, but it decreased from 319 million pounds short to only, get this, 162 million pounds short. That means we're still short 162 million pounds of food to feed Canadians. And since those figures come from Second Harvest, my tendency is to believe that they're accurate. So here's my question. Where does my tax money go, or where, more correctly, should it go first? To feed hungry Canadians or to feed hungry sub-Saharan Africans? Forget the pandemic. Go back to 2018. Look up the numbers. Food insecurity in Canada was in the 10 to 15% range. That's not in a pandemic. That was just basic. So I've got to believe it's somewhere in there now, if not larger. And that's the range, depending on whose numbers you looked at. When kids are starving in my country, that's where my tax money needs to go. That's it. We're going to try to do these, if not one a day, then one every 2 days. Subjects to come: climate change, the leadership that we've got, and what's going on the conservative side. And I want to talk briefly, and I'm going to do that right now, actually, about Michael Ford. Michael Ford, as you know, is a cabinet minister, and he's also the nephew of one Doug Ford, who had the, I suppose, pleasure. Must have been a pleasure to appoint your nephew. He appointed him to cabinet, where he is Minister of Citizenship, It's a low-level portfolio compared to, say, health or consumer affairs or education, but it is a start, and it is a cabinet table seat, so he gets to sit in on the Executive Council's workings and make his views known. Not only that, Michael Ford brought home a riding, a constituency for the Ford government, for the Progressive Conservatives that they just haven't had. Michael Ford won in York South-Weston. The last MPP for York South-Weston was Faisal Hassan, a New Democrat. Before that, Laura Albanese, a Liberal. Before that, Paul Ferreira, a New Democrat. Before that, Joe Cordiano, a Liberal. So the Progressive Conservatives have not seen that riding on their side of the house for a very long time. Michael Ford brought it home. Michael Ford is not even out of his 20s. He has served successfully on city council for the city of Toronto. He has served successfully as a school trustee. By all accounts, he has done a really good job. He's put his nose to the grindstone, and you should not mistake the fact that his size and stature somehow are the mark of a person who is less than anybody else. Quite the contrary. I'd say that on all levels, he's more than anybody else, and he, as much as anybody, deserved to be appointed by Doug Ford. I don't know if you know this about Michael Ford. Michael Ford is a name that he took. His name is Michael, and Ford is in there somewhere, but he has a different last name that belongs to a guy who's serving time in Canadian Federal Penitentiary for manslaughter. And coming from a family background like that, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be a really good person and serve your community and run at a very tender age for public office and make it work, and this is the third level of making it work, says to me that whether his last name is or was Ford or not, is of no consequence whatsoever, that there's every reason for Doug Ford to select him as a member of his cabinet, and the fact that they happen to share a last name and some familial relationship as uncle and nephew doesn't bother me, because I have bothered myself to go and look up Michael Ford's background and say, you know what? As good as anybody is Michael Ford. I think he's going to be a good cabinet member. And let's just watch and see before we draw our conclusions. There are a lot of public statements coming from media and the like where, oh, this is just about nepotism. No, it doesn't seem to be about nepotism. It seems to be about something that has been earned. And I, for one, will be watching with interest. Have a wonderful Canada Day weekend. And I'll be talking to you next week, more than once. Take care. This is Peter Shurman, and you've been with Shurman Unlimited.
Shurman Unlimited.
Let Peter know what's on your mind. Drop him an email. info@petersherman.com. Find future episodes wherever you find your favorite podcasts. So if you like what you've heard, tell a friend. If you really liked it, tell 3 friends. If you really hated it, tell 3 enemies. We'll talk again soon.